Hey, this is Jennifer Batten, and you are listening to Nothing Shocking Podcast. But there might be something shocking, so stay tuned.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Jennifer Batten.
Yeah, former guitarist for the Michael Jackson touring band and also Jeff Beck Band as well.
And she's got some books out there. Check them out.
Yeah, she'll be doing some shows in the Pacific Northwest area here coming this September. Check it out.
All right, good night.
Good night. Jennifer, welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Jennifer, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a true honor. Thank you for the correspondence. We're excited to have you tonight. Let's get right into it. You are well on your way to having a busy late July, August, and September with a number of upcoming live shows. Can you give our listeners an insight where they can catch you live this summer or this late summer, early fall?
Yeah, all the dates, as soon as they're confirmed, end up on jenniferbatten.com under performances. This summer, I've successfully done this a few years in a row. I get to stay home in the Northwest all summer with my cover band, and we do the outdoor festivals and stuff. So I'm really digging that. And then it's not even waiting until September. August 30th, I'm flying to Bogota. I got a couple shows in Colombia. Back for 5 days and then off to the UK for a 3-week tour and then back for a week and back to Portugal. So
wow.
A lot of frequent flyer miles for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, just tell us a little bit about your show and what can fans expect when they come to the Jennifer Batten show.
Oh, God knows. Well, the cover band stuff, I'm doing Van Halen and Toto and Journey and that kind of stuff, and doing a few instrumentals, doing Girls Just Want to Have Fun as a guitar instrumental. That always gets people dancing, that's super fun. I do a lot of different stuff. Starting last year, all the Michael Jackson tributes came out of the woodwork, and so that's what I'm doing a lot of. I did 7 different ones last year, which sounds like a piece of cake since I know the songs, except that they all sing them in different keys with different forms. So I got to do my homework every time I take off for a new one, and it's rough when they're back to back. I got to have an iPad with notes. It's like, oh, God, beat it in C# tonight.
When it comes to putting a set list together from your solo albums, how much material you take off of your solo material? Are you heavy in one album, or you just try to divide them up equally amongst both albums, I guess?
Oh, it's just the ones that have survived over the years. I couldn't even tell you what albums they're from now. I mostly do my originals with my solo show. Next Sunday, I'm opening for Greg Howe, doing my solo show, which is in sync with films that I make. So there's gonna be a couple instrumentals there. I actually have no idea what I'm gonna play. I kind of wait till the last minute and then go, oh God, I have to really get it together. I'm definitely gonna do a couple Jeff Beck tunes. Nice. I'm gonna do one called Porcupine that's just got the kill groove, and Two Rivers, which is just a gorgeous tune. And it just depends what emails come in, what the work is, and I figure out what I need to do my homework on from there. In fact, I just got a gig in, it's kind of like a Michael Jackson convention coming up in Madrid in October. And I made a bunch of videos for Jackson tunes that I haven't played in forever. So I got a lot of homework getting those back together.
Oh, very good.
Can you talk a little bit about your guitars? Do you have a large guitar collection? Do you use like your favorite one that you use on most stuff, or how's it work for you?
Well, I'm going through a big tone chasing phase right now. I have been with Washburn for decades, and I played with a tribute in Brazil not long ago. Well, I played with them 3 times. The other guitar player, Leandre Gomez, is just a phenomenal player. And I thought for years that I couldn't get a super stratty sound out of my Washburn that I played for the last 7 or 8 years because it was 24 fret. And so I couldn't get the proper strat spacing. And then I played his Sur guitar through my system that was 24 frets. And, the heavens opened up. So first I thought I'd go the cheap route, and I just bought the pickups and put them in the Washburn. That didn't cut it. So I ended up pulling the trigger and getting a Sur guitar, and now I have 2. So I'm really knocked out by those. I'm experimenting with a few others too. I just got one of the Fender Pro Lux guitars with a Floyd on it, and I was actually really disappointed in the pickups. So I'm going through the thing of swapping those out and see if I can get it to sound like a proper Strat. I mean, Fender invented that sound, and they've kind of lost their way. So I don't know. I haven't settled, but I do love. I have a modern antique Sur that is rocking my world right now.
Well, so cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about your work with Washburn guitars. You've played Washburn guitars for over 2 decades. Can you give our listeners an insight to the origins of your partnership with Washburn?
Yeah, it's a real good music industry story. They basically had a headhunter that took me out to lunch and told me everything I wanted to hear, and so I signed on, and he promptly fucked off the Fender. So kind of left me there, and I don't want to look flaky, There's people that change companies every couple of years, and so you can't really rely on what you think their sound is coming from. Mm-hmm. But honestly, Washburn gave me some really great guitars, and I really liked them. I played, it was my own model that I played when I was with Jeff Beck. And then 7-8 years ago, they had a series called Parallax guitars. And it just happened that everything they sent me really felt great and sounded great. And I really do like the sound of the Parallax that I used. But at this point, there's so many shows that I'm doing that I really need some great clean sounds, like the 2 and 4 positions. So that was one of my big motivations to use Sur guitars. But having said that, I called Washburn and said, I'm out. I want to be a free agent. I want to, the freedom to experiment with different things. So, and their company really has changed. The only electric they really sell now is the Nuno models, and everything else is acoustic. So I couldn't even get another Parallax if I wanted one.
Oh, very good.
Most of our listeners probably know you started, with Michael Jackson, 1987-88 Bad Tour. But where did Jennifer Batten come before that? Can you give our listeners a little insight into, your history? Like, where did you come from?
Well, let's see. I started playing when I was 8. I started taking lessons right away. in upstate New York. Then the family moved to San Diego, and we moved a couple of times. And every time we moved, I ended up with a different teacher. And eventually I saw an ad in the back of Guitar Player magazine about this new school called the Guitar Institute of Technology. And I went up for a symposium where they were trying to promo the school and get people to know about it. And it was full of jazz guitar players talking theory that was so far over my head, I had no clue. I took a test to get in at the end of the symposium and flunked miserably. Then they sent me back home, and I studied with a really great jazz guitar player named Peter Sprague for 6 really intense months, and that was enough to get me caught up to speed and into the school. And after that, I just played in various bands, cutting my teeth on stage for the first time, doing covers and fusion songs. And eventually I was in, I think 6 different bands by the time I got the Jackson gig. And that was playing around Hollywood. Most of it was original stuff, which means you're lucky to play once or twice a month. So being in 6 bands, it sounds like overload, but it wasn't. I just wanted to be playing all the time. And then I heard about the Jackson audition, and I was the lucky winner.
Nice.
Fantastic. I want to bring this to ear protection. When it comes to playing a magnitude of live shows, like an artist of your magnitude, you have to have good inner ear protection. Can you talk a little bit more about the product that you use and how beneficial has it been for you, I should say?
That just triggered a memory from when I first moved to LA, and I remember I was going to this audition, and I opened up the door to the rehearsal studio, and it was so loud, I turned around and went home. It was just like I completely lost interest. It was awful. But sadly, for many years, I didn't use any protection at all, and I would just let my ears get bombarded. And I tried using earplugs, and anybody that's used them and tried to play, you just lose so many frequencies and so many details in hearing and playing that I just couldn't do it. And I started using in-ear monitors with Michael Jackson. That was, I think everybody had them back in the day when they were really crap. They were uncomfortable, and the stuff that they were made out of was not great, and the sound was not great. And I would pull them out when I ran out front to do solos, and I would only keep them in when I was back in my position. But eventually, I think this was after I was with Jeff Beck. I mean, that was 3 years of losing frequencies for sure. It was so loud. And in his band, I tried using plugs. And, I suppose if it was Metallica or something that was on 11 all the time, that would have worked and I would have got used to it. But with Jeff, he'd go from 11 down to a whisper of a ballad. And I would just find that I would have a patch up with this really long delay, and I wasn't hearing it to turn it off when I had earplugs. Mm. So after a few days of trying plugs, I just stopped and let my ears be abused. But then fast forward, I heard about a company called Sensophonics that was doing an in-ear monitor system called 3D Ambient. And that still is the best thing out there, and it's been improved a lot over the years and is much cheaper now than when I first bought it at $2,500, and then my puppy ate them. Very expensive dog.
Yeah.
And the unique thing about it is they're connected to a box, and there's a microphone in each ear. So you can be sent a mix and then dial in the outside ambience, because one of the biggest complaints about people that use in-ear monitors is you lose touch with the audience, and you see their hands clapping, but you don't hear them. So it's the best of both worlds. And if I'm in a situation where I don't have a feed of a mix, I'll still use those and only use the microphones, and I'll be listening at maybe a third of the volume that everybody else is listening at. And it's super clear, unlike earplugs. I'll take it to comedy shows because anytime you go to a comedy show, at some point during somebody's set, they're going to scream into the microphone. And my ears are damaged to the point where, I mean, if there's a siren coming my way, I just stop and plug my ears because it hurts. I don't dig it at all. So I'm a real believer in this. It's now they're just under $800. And they, in the olden days, I mean, you can still do this. You can get individual custom fit and go to an audiologist and get a mold made. But I use the one size fits all, and I use tips that are memory foam from a company called Comply. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, you know, I think anybody listening that has used in-ear monitors, especially if you're in smaller clubs and the drums are just bombastic, it's really hard to get great isolation. And if you experiment by, for instance, having the band or just the drummer play and put a little bit of pressure with your fingers on the monitors, it's night and day isolation. And so now I'm working on this invention, not for sale, it's just for myself, of taking memory wire and having just a little bit of pressure pushing on the in-ear monitors. And it's heaven. I mean, it's as close to a CD as I'll ever get live. So I just wish it was invented 30 years ago. My ears would be in a lot better shape.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. You've kind of alluded to touring with Jeff Beck and Michael Jackson. Can you give our listeners a little bit insight into any touring challenges that you may have experienced during those times?
Touring with those guys was first class. And there are no challenges. It's just get your ass out of bed and on the bus to the next gig, and it's just sheer joy. I would say with Michael Jackson, gosh, it was such a big show, and there was always at least 50,000 people. So we'd play maybe 2 or 3 days a week. With Jeff, you know, it might be 5,000 people, so it's a different size audience, and instead of having 100 people in the entourage traveling from city to city, we had 6, was it? No, it had to be more than that. 4 people in the band, a couple managers, and a few roadies. So obviously a much smaller organization. And it was a lot more fun. I mean, Jeff Beck's music is right up my alley. I was a fan since I was probably 13 years old. So that was just bliss, hanging on the bus and listening to music and listening to his opinions about music and different players. It was a real wonderful education. And the first time that the manager was driving me to his house, you know, I was already kind of crapping myself about getting the gig, as you might, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the anxiety was through the roof. And the manager goes, okay, well, normally in Jeff's bands, the musical director is the keyboard player. And since you're the one triggering synth sounds, you're it. And I'm just taking this information going, okay. You know, I don't even know if I'll be here next week, and now I'm the musical director. Jesus Christ. But a lot of it had to do with Jeff's personality. He was just like a kid in the sandbox. He just wanted to play and have fun. Yeah. And so mostly what I did was organizational, and he'd call me and ask me to have the band rehearse a few things before he came in, that sort of thing. So that was just a blast.
Fantastic. You know, as far as we're talking about touring, obviously it's a grind on any artist.
Yeah.
At this point of your career, though, do you have a limit of how many live shows you're playing a year, or is it sky's the limit, or as the gigs come? How does it work for you?
Well, for one thing, I don't count them. I have no clue how many. I would have to pull up my calendar from last year to tell how many gigs I played. But I like to. The older I get, the less I want to travel. And since COVID, you know, be careful what you wish for. I wasn't going anywhere. So, and I started a cover band in town because I didn't want to travel so much, and now I'm traveling more than ever. It's just kind of crazy. And I did have a limit of being out a month. That was plenty for me. And lo and behold, I'll be out for 6 weeks, I think, in the fall in one chunk. So It's a lot. And flying ain't no joke. I mean, my last trip was to Brazil, and I had a 25-hour flight delay.
Oh.
So I lived in the airport, got a few hours sleep in a hotel. They said we'd be taking off at 10 the next morning, and I was there till 7:30 that night. And it was so late that I missed the tour bus. And once I got to Sao Paulo, I had to fly to another city to catch up with the tour. So that kind of stress, it's out of your control, and it's, to put it mildly, I'm over it.
Understandable. I wanted to bring this back to your journey into Jeff Beck's band. You touched on this briefly, but you were in the band for a 3-year stretch, 2 albums, and was it 2 world tours? Can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, touring the world with Jeff Beck?
Oh God, it was comedy. He was a really interesting character. All of his best friends were comedians, and for the most part, the audience had no idea how funny he was because you don't get to hang out with him, right? Before a show, he was kind of getting his show head together, and it could be sometimes very difficult to have a conversation with him because he's, collecting his energy for the show. But once the show was over, it was party time. And I'll give you an example. One night we were in a bar, and one of his friends was there and started doing the arm fart like you do when you're 6 years old.
Right.
And that turned into a thing that we would do every single night after the show. We'd walk off stage and immediately sit together and get out our stopwatches to see who could do the longest arm fart without laughing. And, it was like that. We would, there were certain things that he would latch on to, like the intro dancing on Austin Powers. And we would watch that every night for one leg of the tour, or the rabbit scene in Monty Python. We'd put that on loop. It was really a joy. And of course, obviously, to play the music. I remember he asked me to join the band, and I thought he was bonkers because he had never played with me before. I thought, how can you have that much faith? By that time, I had a couple records out, but I had a session booked to Milan doing techno music, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be on that side of the ocean. I'm going to book myself down to Jeff's house, and I learned most of the Guitar Shop record and played it for him and forced an audition on myself. And after 4 or 5 songs, he started playing with me, and then his wife brought out the whiskey about midnight. And I had to fly back to Milan the next day, and it wasn't pretty. So, yeah, I mean, I had a lot more confidence at that point, but I didn't tell anybody I had the gig until we were well into rehearsals and just kind of let it leak out at that point.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah. But we kind of been talking about guitar, but besides guitar, I think you also play a guitar synthesizer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that instrument?
Yeah, well, the first time I played with Jeff was he rented 2 days of SIR rehearsal studios in New York, and the original band was supposed to be Terry Bozzio and Tony Levin. And I walked into rehearsal expecting to see a keyboard player, and there wasn't one. And he was thinking I would just play all those songs from Wired and Blow by Blow, just comping with guitar, and I thought, man, that is not going to work. So right after that, I was going to the Frankfurt Music Fair, and ended up walking out of there with a synthesizer endorsement from a company called Axon, and I started working with it. And it was supposed to be the fastest tracking synth at the time, and it was great, but the sounds were crap, and so I ended up using the physical boxes, the Roland 1080s for sounds, and there was all kinds of mistriggering problems with the two companies. Didn't want to play nice with each other, so I ended up with all Roland gear about a week before we went out. It was slower, but it was reliable, and I just got as close as I could to the patches that Max Middleton and Jan Hammer had on the records, and Tony Hymas, And there was a whole lot of programming. Boy, I would go in 2 hours before rehearsal started, at least. And the time I wasn't spending playing his guitar through his gear, I was working with synthesizer stuff. And fortunately, most of it was playing pads. So even though it was slow, it wasn't a big deal. But there were certain things. Like, he wanted me to play a flute sound and play a duet with him. And, man, I mean, once you're so used to how a guitar reacts, and you can do your own vibrato and tremolo bar stuff, at that time the synthesizer couldn't track it very well, so it sounded super stiff. And, you know, if I have any regrets in my life, is that the Fishman triple play wasn't invented 25 years ago, because that kicks ass, and that will track anything, any nuance of your fingers, the vibrato, trem bar, whatever. So I'm really glad that I jumped in with both feet, and I think it was a much better live show triggering synthesizer than it would have been with guitar.
Oh, so cool. Well, you know, your journey into the Michael Jackson Band is well documented. The band itself was second to none talent-wise, obviously. But can you kind of talk to us a little bit more about playing in that band? Did it have to make you feel like you had to bring up your A game or sharpen your chops a little bit more? Just talk a little bit more, maybe apart from Michael Jackson himself, but the actual band itself.
Yeah. Wow. You know, I was really working on fusion music, and I was working on my first album with this giant steps tapping solo that I'd worked out. And in my mind, being an arrogant fuck, you know, when you really haven't done anything and you're out of music school, you think, oh, I'm going to take over the world. Well, you know, I had already been in a cover band, and essentially when you play Michael Jackson show, it's basically a glorified cover band, except all the hits are by the same guy. And so I went in with a lot of confidence, and you know, I'm playing with these guys like Ricky Lawson, who was #1 call, Whitney Houston, Lionel Richie, you know, you name it.
Right.
And Greg Fillinganes, who is, I mean, just a monster. He's probably on most of the records you own, you know. I think he played with Stevie Wonder when he was 16, just a child prodigy. All of a sudden, I'm in the company of these guys, and I was like, I worked my ass off because I didn't want anybody have any reason to fire me. I just worked on those parts and sounds, you know, all waking hours. And I remember at one point, Greg came in maybe a week late. He was doing some other stuff, and I was showing him the form to Billie Jean because it's a little bit quirky, and I think I got this. And at one point, you know, it took him 0.5 seconds to get up to speed because he's a genius. And at one point he goes, okay, everybody, we got the parts. Now let's work on groove. And that went through me like a lightning bolt. I thought, oh, God, the white girl ain't grooving? Jesus. You know? And honestly, spending a year and a half working with musicians of that caliber that were so seasoned and so top-notch, I'll never forget coming back and playing with, once the tour was over, I played with a band that I had been playing with, and I was thinking, how come you guys suck now? You know, because as a musician, you don't realize your improvement day by day.
Right.
If you go back a year or 5 years, you might go, oh, God, I sucked back then. But my ear had improved so much from just being and playing with those people and listening to Ricky's Time for a year and a half. That my time just got a hell of a lot better. And I was glad he pointed that out. You know, he was always extremely kind about stuff. If you weren't doing the right voicing or something, he would straighten you out in a heartbeat. But it was a wonderful education in the beauty of parts. And that's mostly what it was. I mean, people know me for playing the Beat It solo, and I was doing that in a cover band before I got the Jackson gig. But 99% of that show is grooving with parts.
Oh, yeah.
So cool.
Let's talk a little bit about some more recent session work. 2021, you had an album out with I'm probably going to mess this up. Jania Jade, Heart of Rock and Roll. Can you talk a little bit about the making of that album?
Yeah. She sent me, what did she do? She went in the studio and recorded everything live with her voice and guitar, and then had the poor drummer lay on parts afterwards, which is not the recommended way to go. So the time is a little squirrely in parts, but I loved doing it because it was during COVID, and I did the whole record, which usually people just have me play a tune or two, and she just let me have my way with it. I just listened and just had a good time laying down whatever I wanted and however many tracks that I wanted. And I did slide guitar and decorated here and there. And I think she kept just about everything I did. So nice. it was kind of nice to being able to just take the canvas and paint as I wanted to.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. All right. I hope I can form this question the right way to where you can understand it and I can understand it, because it's going through my brain, but I don't know if I can say it the right way. But so I'm going to give it a stab here. So bear with me. So Jennifer Batten, the guitarist of the Michael Jackson Band, opposed to being in the Jeff Beck Band, a solo artist and a hired gun, and also a cover, also in a covers band. You take all of that into one. All those experiences, and I guess maybe can you talk a little bit more about how you evolved as a guitarist and all that? Am I making sense here?
Yeah, I think any situation that you're involved in with music is going to make you better. And like I said, you don't really realize it as you're doing it, but as the years go on, especially now, I realize, boy, that situation I was in there is helping me now in this way. It's like when you're in kindergarten or something and you're trying to put the square peg in the round hole and you're going, well, this doesn't fit. Let's try the other one. And it's because of those little lessons that you did day by day along the way that you have life skills, regarding kindergarten and basic math and all that. But it's the same with music. The more in fact, you were talking about the recording sessions, and I've done a lot in the last few years. I get these, pockets of time where I just got stuff stacked up, and it's all I can do to keep up. But the cool thing about it is I've done everything from new age ambient to really hardcore metal, like in the last 6 months. And this guy, Mr. Fastfinger, Micah, I'm freaking on his last name. I think he's from Finland. He had me play on his record, and that was in 5/4, and that was kind of a fusion thing. So it's really joyous that I'm able to do all these different genres. Yeah. Now, if somebody wanted me to play a country tune, I'm not the one to call, but I would do my best. And Martin Mocknick, I'm actually looking at 2 albums. They sent me vinyl for one. The last hardcore metal one is called Lord of the Lost. And then Martin Mocknick, of course, because it's a live interview here, I can't remember his band. Accept, I think he plays in Accept. But he's got a couple of solo projects that he had a bunch of guitar players play on. And that one was really beautiful. When you're sent stuff that you don't write, it really makes you raise your level to match what you're given. So I like to live with a tune. I much prefer to play at home rather than have somebody paying for studio time and the red lights on and do your thing. Because I have anxiety with red lights. It's like, oh shit, here we go, and I'm too self-conscious. But if I can live with the tune for a couple hours to a couple days and really start to absorb it, you're going to get a lot better product out of me than saying 1, 2, go.
Yeah, very cool. Well, the other one I was going to ask you about was 2017's Battle Zone with Mark Scheer and Jim Petrick from Survivor.
Yeah, that was an interesting session because I was sent. Actually, I wasn't sent. They flew me to Chicago to play on 3 or 4 songs, and it was one of the most prolific live times I've ever had, because it is the situation where, okay, red light's on, go, do something. And I heard the songs prior, so I was able to live with them a little bit before I flew. And we also, I think we did 3 songs in a night, and the next day we started off by writing a tune, which was Battle Zone itself. And I flew home and thought, okay, well, I did my thing. And then they wanted more. And then eventually Mark Scher, the singer, called me up and said, your guitar is more like another voice on the record, so I want you to be a bigger part of it. So all of a sudden it's called the Scher Batten Project. And it's the most painless record I ever did, because I didn't know I was doing it.
So cool. All right, so we're running out of our allotted time for the evening. We have one last question for you. We ask this to all of our guests, so you're not excluded, so this is a tough one for the evening. All right, are you ready for this?
I'm scared.
All right, you better be. So the mystery of rock and roll. You were part of the mystery of rock and roll when you were a band member of the Michael Jackson Band. The dawning of the internet and social medias have taken away the mystery and mystique of rock and roll and other genres as well. For you, the artist and the fan, do you miss the mystique and mystery of rock and roll, or do you like this new age of accessibility that we have? Because if we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you right now. So what are your thoughts on that?
There's pluses and minuses. I would say there's some people out there that are doing live all the time. They're super famous, and I'm thinking, I really don't want to see you drinking orange juice.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm more of a private person, so I don't go live all the time and say, here's what I'm doing today, here's what I'm doing tomorrow, and I'll post on Facebook, but it's mostly gigs to just let people know where I'm playing. But I mean, the positive side is a lot of people have access to me, and I've gotten a lot of work because of it. Like all of these recordings, nobody knew my postbox number before this, so I'll get an email and go, this last week I got two different gigs from just waking up and looking at email. One is I was going to go to Portugal and do 2 gigs and come home, and then somebody saw that I was doing that and wanted me the next day to fly to Dusseldorf and do something. Then somebody else saw that and said, well, can you come to Madrid after that? So now instead of 4 days, I'm there for 2 weeks. So I love that. I mean, that's the greatest.
Absolutely. We're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
No, just people go to jenniferbatten.com if you want my CDs or instructionals and want to find out where I'm playing. And that's about it.
Fantastic. Well, this is how things are going to work out. We're about 3.5 weeks behind on our episodes, but when Jeff, the editing wizard over here, gets this all cleaned up, I'll send you the link, and please share it wherever you can.
I will. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. You were fantastic. It was a true honor.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. They roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.